العلم أشراف مطلوب وطالبه لله أكرام من يمشي على قدمه. العلم نور مبين يستضيء به أهل السعادات والجهال في الظلم.
لكن there's two opinions. First opinion is that 80 kilometers, 77 to 80 kilometers. And the second opinion is that it goes back to the custom. It goes back to the custom. Also, some of the masail that the scholars talk about when talking about a safar as a reason, a sabab for taking the rukhas or concessions, is that it has to be a safar that is mubah. It has to be a safar that is mubah. So, for example, a person is going to travel, visiting someone, or for work purposes, or مثلا for conference or lecture and so on. That can, they're allowed to take advantage of. They're allowed to take advantage of the concessions of a traveler. Like in the scholars say, na'am. So they use that as a condition. Like in some of the scholars.
So in this context.
مثلا the Hanafiya, Shaykh al-Islam, they say that, and this isn't a condition. There's nothing that states that that safar has to be permissible. طيب. Nabil, you said, what is the custom? It means urf, meaning what is considered traveling according to the people, the custom of the people. That's the meaning of custom. طيب. The third condition that the scholars talk about when traveling is the person has to actually start his journey. And when does a person start his journey? They start their journey when they leave their town, their city. They leave their town or their city. And this is very important. Allah Jalla wa Ala says, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنكُم مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ. So safar is when a person actually goes out and starts his journey. Allah Jalla wa Ala did not say, أَوْ عَلَى نِيَّةِ السَّفَرِ, when it comes to the niyyah or the intention of making safar or intention of traveling. Therefore, it is when a person actually leaves their city. And this is very important to know and also to teach people. Because mathalan, you'll find that some people, when they get to Heathrow Airport, you find them shortening the salah. You find them shortening the salah. And this is wrong. This is wrong because Heathrow is part of London. Heathrow is within the city. Now, Gatwick is different because Gatwick is outside London. Gatwick is outside London. Like Heathrow Airport is within the city, within the realms of the city. Therefore, it is not. No, so there's not. Mathalan, it is not outside of the city. Also, mathalan, if you're traveling to Manchester, mathalan, or Liverpool, then you can, by the time you get onto the motorway, that's when you're outside of London. So mathalan, once you get onto the motorway, that is when your journey starts. Sahih, it's true that you've started your journey when you're packing and you're at home and you're going to say to everyone, I'm traveling. Sahih. Lakin, when you can actually start taking advantage of the concessions, shortening the prayer and so on, is when you get onto the motorway. So the questions after, inshallah. I'll answer the questions after. طيب. From the asbab of a takhfif is al-ikrah. Al-ikrah, when a person is forced to do something that they do not want to do, based on the hadith the hadith of Abdullah ibn Abbas, إن الله تجاوز لي عن أمتي الخطأ والنسيان وما استكره عليه. My ummah has been pardoned for that which they are forced to do. طيب. Also, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا طلاق ولا اعتاق في إغلاق. يعني إكراهٍ. There is no talaq and there is no release and freeing of servants when a person is being forced to do. طيب. So if a person is forced to do something, that ikrah or that forcing, the rule, whatever happens by way of that force, isn't taken into consideration in terms of the Sharia. So, mathalan, if a person says You have to divorce your wife, and a person is forced to divorce his wife. We look at the conditions in a minute, and they're forced to divorce their wife. Then they are after they are in a safe location and they are no longer being forced. It is permissible for them to go back to their wife, and they are not in reality divorced, or they haven't divorced their wife. Right. Lakin there are conditions that have to be taken into consideration for the ikrah, for the compulsion to be sahih. First of all, the first condition is أن يكون المكره قادرا على إيقاع ما هدد به والمكره ليس قادرا على دفعه. The first condition is that the person carrying out, or the person forcing another person, has to genuinely be able to carry out the threat. And the person that is being threatened is not able to defend themselves. Is not able to defend him or herself. So that's the first condition. Like in مثلا, if someone who, a child threatens you, he says, I'm going to beat you up, and you're another, I'm going to beat you up if you don't do this, then it's not possible for this child to do this. And secondly, the person is able to defend themselves. So that isn't a reason for ikrah. The second condition is that the ikrah, the threat, must be at the present, it must be taking place right now. It can't be delayed. So if someone says, divorce your wife now, or I will kill you in a year's time. Or divorce your wife now, otherwise you lose your job in a year's time. That is not permissible. That is not permissible. That is not a genuine ikrah. That is not genuine compulsion. Therefore, if a person does it, then that ikrah, the ahkam are the ahkam that would normally take place by way of the action that they're doing are to be taken into consideration. So, for example, if a person says to another, divorce your wife, or I'm going to kill you in a year's time, and the person says, yeah, طيب, khalas, she's divorced, then that divorce takes place. That divorce takes place. The third condition is that the actual threat must be difficult in of itself to carry out. So, if someone says, I'm going to kill you, then طبعا, that is a real threat, and the person is not able to cope with that harm. Like if someone says, divorce your wife, or you're going to lose your job. Lose the job, it's not the end of the world. Lose the job, it's not the end of the world. Therefore, that isn't to be taken into consideration, and there's no ahkam that come about by way of that ikrah. The fourth condition, the fourth condition is that ikrah has to be illegitimate, it has to be wrong. Like if a first person is forced to do something by a hakim, then that is not ikrah. So if a person is prevented from using their mal, they're prevented from using their money, they've been declared bankrupt, and something which is called hajr happens, then that is ikrah. That cannot be considered ikrah. Because it is permissible, it is shari'i for that person to be declared bankrupt. Right. Or na'am. So these are the four conditions, or the five conditions that the scholars mention for ikrah to be justified. Right. The last line, anwa' al-takhfif. So we've talked about the reasons for takhfif or taysir or ease. Now we're going to talk about the different types, or the different ways that ease happens, the different types of concessions. The first one is al-isqad, leaving out, or omission, or leaving out. So مثلا a person is traveling. It is not wajib for them to pray Salatul Jum'ah. So Salatul Jum'ah is they're allowed to completely cancel it out or leave it out. مثلا, a person is marid. It's not wajib for them to go to the jama'ah. It's not wajib for them to go to the jama'ah. مثلا, if a person is not able to perform hajj, if a person is not able for health reasons, then they are excused from going to hajj. Right. تخفيف النقص. As for naqs, it is مثلا, an example is the shortening of the prayer. The shortening of the prayer. So if a person is traveling, they can shorten their prayer. They've now decreased the salah from 4 to 2. From 4 to 2. طيب. مثلا, when a person is ill and they're not able to pray standing up, they're allowed to leave out the condition of, or the rukn of standing. The Messenger ﷺ said, "Salli qa'iman." So standing is a condition for the salah, is a pillar of the salah. One must stand if they intend to pray. If they want to pray for their salah to be correct, they need to stand. Like if a person is ill, they're allowed to do naqs, they're allowed to pray sitting down. That is called naqs. That is called a naqs. Likewise, if a person is not able to go down for ruku' or sujood, then they are allowed to sit on a chair and pray on that chair. So that is a naqs. Right. Ibdal, replacement or replacing of the ibadah. The replacing of the ibadah. Right. مثلا, a person is not able to stand. They replace it with sitting down. They replace it with sitting down. Or they're not able to physically even pray. They're allowed to point with their eyes, use their eyes to do what is called al-ishara. To do what is called al-ishara. طيب. التأخير, delaying. Delaying, مثلا, an example of التأخير, مثلا, the 5 daily prayers when a person is traveling, or the 4 daily prayers when a person is traveling. If a person is traveling, they can combine Zuhr and Asr, and then they can combine Maghrib and Isha. What does it mean to delay the Salah? مثلا, Zuhr and Asr, you pray Zuhr and Asr at the time of Asr. Or you pray Maghrib and Isha at the time of Isha. At the time of Isha. At the time of Isha. طيب. مثلا, تأخير as well, delay. If a person is مثلا ill or they're traveling, they delay the fasting of Ramadan until after Ramadan. After Ramadan, until they get better. Right. At-taqdeem, bringing forward, is also the opposite. مثلا, if a person is allowed to pray Asr and Dhuhr at the time of Dhuhr. And likewise, they're allowed to pray Isha and Maghrib at the time of Maghrib. So that is called at-taqdeem. Likewise, Zakah. مثلا, Zakat al-Fitr. You're allowed to pay Zakat al-Fitr from day 28, 29, and so on. 2 days before the end of Ramadan. 2 days before the end of Ramadan. Also, Zakat al-Mal, you're able to pay 2 years or 1 year in advance, as Abbas radiallahu anhu did. Right. Then there's at-taghyir, the changing of the actual ibadah. And the example of that is Salatul Khawf. Salatul Khawf, a person is meant to pray, or the Muslims are meant to pray in jihad. However, they can. Right. Also, from the concessions, at-taghyir, being given a choice to do whether this or that. So, مثلا, the expiations of kafarat, they can either choose to feed a group of people or clothe a group of people, masakin, 10 masakin, or they can free a slave. Likewise, if a person is in ihram, in a state of ihram, and they مثلا kill in the state of ihram in Mecca, or in a while being in a state of ihram, they can either pay the equivalent to what they have killed, or they can feed a certain number of masakin in Mecca, or they can fast a certain number of days. They can fast a certain number of days. So that is also the anwa' al-taysir, anwa' al-takhfif. طيب. So that's the end of that qa'idah that the Shaykh mentions. Lakin, there are 2 other qa'idas that the Shaykh mentions in line number 16 and 17, where the Sheikh says, وَلَيْسَ وَاجِبٌ بِالْاقْتِدَارِ وَلَا مُحَرَّمٌ مَعَ الضِّرَارِ وَكُلُّ مَحْظُورٍ مَعَ الضَّرُورَةِ بِقَدْرِ مَا تَحْتَاجُهُ الضَّرُورَةِ. There are three principles that the Sheikh, rahmatullahi alayhi, mentions that go along with this qa'idah. And they can be considered as restrictions for this qa'idah. Al-mashaqqatu tajlibu at-taysir. So they come under the main qa'idah. So for example, Allah subhanahu la wajiba ma'al ajz, meaning is there is no wajib if a person is not able to perform the wajib, if the person is not able to carry out the wajib. Right. No. If a person doesn't have the ability to carry out the wajib, then they are excused. So وَلَيْسَ وَاجِبٌ بِالْاقْتِدَارِ. As for wajib, obviously the ta'rif is ما أمر به الشارع على سبيل اللزوم. That which the shari', which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, have commanded us to do by way of luzum, as a must, which has made that which has been made mandatory to practice. For example, the salah, zakah, hajj, and so on. So there is no wajib ma'al ajz. So if a person is not able to perform hajj, then they don't have to perform hajj. Why? Because la wajiba ma'al ajz. There is no wajib with ajz. A person having to stand up for salah. The person is not able to stand for the salah. What should they do? Sit down. La wajiba ma'al ajz. The evidence for this is this, the verse of Allah Jalla wa Ala, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ. So for this qa'idah, that you can see لا واجب مع العجز, the evidence for that is Surah Al-Taghabun, verse number 16. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Also, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in authentic hadith, إِذَا أَمَرْتُكُمْ بِأَمْرٍ فَأْتُوا مِنْهُ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ. If I command you with a command, فَأْتُوا مِنْهُ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Do as much of it as you can. Do as much of it as you can. So for example, the Messenger said, stand praying. If you're not able to stand praying, then sit down, lakin carry on praying. If you're not able to sit down, then lie down, lakin carry on praying at the same time. Right. So مثلا, if a person can't perform hajj physically, then they send someone to go perform hajj. They pay money and they do hajj badal. Someone does hajj badal for them. Right. The next qa'idah that the Shaykh mentions is, or the wording that he uses, لا محرم ولا محرم مع الضرار. If we want, we can also use الضرورات تبيح المحظورات. الضرورات, necessities, تبيح المحظورات, make permissible that which is impermissible. The ضرورات make permissible that which is haram. مثلا Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says وَقَدْ فَصَّلَ لَكُمْ مَا حَرَمَ عَلَيْكُمْ إِلَّا مَا اضْطُرِرْتُمْ إِلَيْهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has clarified and made clear that which he has made haram upon you, except under compulsion of necessity. So the evidence for this qa'idah, الضرورات تبيح المحظورات, is the statement of Allah Jalla wa Ala, Surah Al-An'am, verse 119. So when a person is forced to do something that is muharram, then that muharram becomes permissible for them to do whilst this necessity is there. مثلا Allah Jalla wa Ala says, فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ. The one who is forced مثلا to eat a mayta, and he is not a baghin wala adin, fala ithma alayhi. And al-baghi is the one that indulges in the haram whilst being able to find something which is halal. So in the verse where Allah says, فَمَنِ الضُّرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ, in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 173, al-baghi, as the scholars mention, is the person that indulges in the haram although they are able to find halal. So مثلا, a person is on a long journey, and they're dying of hunger. They can eat a mayta, corpse, dead carcass that is on the floor, or they can ask someone to give them food. If a person goes to the maita, then they are al-baghi, someone that is considered baghi. Why? Because they have taken the haram whilst being able to find the halal. Also, the adi that is mentioned, wala adin, that is mentioned in the verse, is the person that takes above his necessity. He takes above his necessity. So, mathalan, a person is dying of hunger and they eat a maita. It's permissible for them to eat. Allah says, فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِمْ. There is no ithm or sin upon them. Like in this person, not only eats until they're able to stay alive, like they eat until they become full. And they carry on eating for half an hour, 45 minutes, even after they are completely full, to the extent that they cannot walk properly. That is a adi. That is a person that is someone that is a adi. And an example of this, مثلا, if a person goes to a tabib, a person goes to a doctor, it is haram for them to reveal their awrah. Lakin, if there's no way of curing the illness except by way of exposing parts of the awrah, then they should do so. Then they should and they can do so. Also, mathalan, if a woman goes to a doctor, goes to the hospital for illness, mathalan, she's going through cesarean, she's giving birth, and there's no way that this birth can be carried out by natural birth, she's required to go through cesarean birth. And there are no female doctors to carry this out, then it's permissible for her to expose her awrah for this doctor to carry out this operation, this surgery. Because الضرورات تبيح المحظورات. طيب. Lakin there are conditions that need to be fulfilled or met before this qa'id is implemented. الضرورات تبيح المحظورات. The first condition is that the darura, the necessity, must be a reality, it must be factual. It must be something that is there. It's not something that a person assumes is going to happen. So, mathalan, if a person is traveling and then they come across a maita and they say, you know, the journey is long, we're going to eat this maita, this carcass, just in case we feel hungry in an hour or 2 or 3, or just in case we don't find any food for the rest of the day. So that is not permissible. And this qa'idah cannot be implemented in that instance, in that situation. Why? Because hunger is not something that has taken place. Like the second condition is that if a person can find another way, or there's no other way of fulfilling this need except by falling into this fi'l that is muharram. There is no other way of fulfilling this need except by falling into this muharram. Mathalan, the example that we mentioned earlier on, if a person is going past the maita, like there's food there's a neighbor, there's someone that lives in that area, there's someone within the vicinity that they can find food with. So that person has now gone into the haram without meeting this condition of there being another way of fulfilling their need. There being another way of fulfilling their need. Mathalan, if a person needs to go to, or mathalan, a woman needs to go to a doctor, or even a man needs to go to the doctor, needs to go to the hospital, and they're able to find the man. So the man is able to find the man, and they say, can I get a male doctor, please? Like if they don't, and they're automatically given, or they're given a female doctor without even asking, and they go ahead with it, then the darura, the necessity, there isn't a necessity there. There isn't a necessity there. Like if a person asks for a male doctor, or the woman asks for a female doctor, and there is no female or male doctor, depending on the gender of the person, then they've exhausted all avenues of lifting that necessity. Therefore, then we can say ad-daruratu tubihu al-mahdhurat. The third condition is that the necessity has to be taken, or the darura has to be taken according to the need, And this leads us on to the third qa'idah, which is ad-daruratu tuqaddaru biqadriha. Ad-daruratu tuqaddaru biqadriha. the darura, or the necessity, the dire necessity, should be taken advantage of or used according to the need of the person. According to the need of the person. And the evidence for that is the statement of Allah Jalla wa Ala, فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ. The person that is forced to do something, and he is not a baghin wala adin, he's not a person that is transgressing, then فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ, then there is no sin upon him. If we use a contemporary example, مثلا a person goes to the hospital and their need, or مثلا they've got a wound on their leg, on the bottom part of the leg, just above the ankle. They're not allowed to remove the whole awra. They're not allowed to remove the clothing from the whole leg, right from the thigh. Why? Because the need only permits that you lift the garment from just above the ankle for the doctor to operate, to carry out the surgery. Right. So that is according to the need, or this qaida that the Shaykh mentions is وَالضَّرُورَاتُ تُقَدَّرُ بِقَدْرِهَا. الضَّرُورَاتُ تُقَدَّرُ بِقَدْرِهَا. Okay. Also, from the conditions that the scholars mention for this qaida, الضَّرُورَاتُ تُبِيحُ الْمَحْظُورَاتِ, is that when you weigh out the two harms, when you weigh out the darura, that darura has to be lesser in degree than what you're running away from. So مثلا الآن, if a person is on a long journey and they're allowed to eat from the carcass, from the maita, we're all in agreement that you're allowed to eat from this maita. It's permissible for you to eat from this maita, although it is haram. صح? Why? Because you're running away from dying due to hunger. How about if a person says to you, طيب, you're hungry, you're running away from hunger, eat this food or take this poison and you will die immediately. So you're allowed to, so you're running away from hunger, extreme hunger, lakin the option that this person has given you, or the option that is available, is greater than the initial harm. And it's not permissible for you to use this qaida as evidence. Mathalan, if a person is forced to kill another, you can't say ad-darurat tubihu al-mahdhurat. Mathalan, a person is threatened, if you don't kill fulan, I'm going to kill you. You're not allowed to kill fulan, because that is greater than you killing this individual is greater than you being killed, or is at the very least equivalent. So that is one of the conditions that scholars mention. We'll stop there inshallah for this qaida. As I said, I'll email everyone in due course, or I'll email this document to everyone in due course. Inshallah, we'll stop there from now and we'll carry on from وترجع الأحكام لليقين فلا يزيل الشك عن لليقين. You'll understand that because this is a qaida that is kubra, it may take a whole lesson. And the next qaida, اليقين لا يزول بالشك, and what we've done with the last qaida as well, لا ضرر ولا ضرار. After we get past these main qawaa'id, the rest is a piece of cake. So literally maybe finish 10 lines in one day. So we're moving slow at the moment, only because of the qawaa'id that we are taking, that we are studying. Any questions? So there was a question, Nabil. I meant, for example, what does a custom mean in this case? Because, for example, in the UK, I don't think there's a custom opinion on what is traveling. What can be considered is what is considered as the norm. مثلا, when we're going to Birmingham, we consider that as traveling. When we're going to Luton, I'll give you an example. When we're going from here to Luton, we're considered a traveling journey. It's considered out from traveling distance, so we're traveling. So we would shorten when we get to Luton. Whereas it might only take us 45 minutes, 50 minutes to get to Luton. Whereas West London, for example, Hayes and even further, it may take us 2 hours getting there, an hour and a half, hour, 40 minutes. That's not considered a journey. So that is what I mean by what is considered in the customary, according to the urf. According to the urf. Doesn't mean that everyone has to get together in one location and have a consensus on what is considered the urf. So an example you use about drugging would it be considered traveling depending on where other people in the community. In the example you use as drugging, would it be considered traveling depending on whether the people in the community consider so to be? It was just an example. Like if a person mathalan is jogging, that jogging isn't considered traveling. They're just doing exercise. Like if they travel the same distance while being intending to stay there for a couple of days and so on, then that would be considered traveling. So it was just a hypothetical example for the jogging. If a person only hears of the name of Islam but doesn't know anything about Islam, are they classed as not knowing? Allahu A'lam, every individual case is to be looked at differently. Maybe. Right. Aisha says, oh, Afwan. The question is, you said that in Arabic there's a difference between mashaqqa and asr. Can we say that asr is a more intense form of hardship that a person experienced that's more specific to this individual? Allahu A'lam. Allahu A'lam. Just as a side benefit, the scholars mentioned that there are no two words. There are no two words in Arabic that are the same, that carry exactly the same meaning. So mashaqqa and usr, they're both difficulty when you translate in English. Difficulty, hardship. When you look into the dictionary, that's the wording that will come out. Like there's a difference in Arabic between mashaqqa and usr. Mathalan, qa'ada and jalasa. Qa'ada, jalasa. Two different words, both mean he sat down. Like some of the scholars mentioned that qa'ada means if a person is, I believe it was, if a person is standing up and then they sit down, then that means qa'ada fulanun. And jalasa means if a person is lying down and then they sit down, then that is jalasa. And it might be the opposite. Like the point I'm getting at is in Arabic they say there are no two words that are exactly the same and that carry exactly the same meaning. I'll ask you a question now. We are now on Qa'idah number, or line number, just finished line number 17. Would you prefer to do an exam halfway through the matan in the 25th line, for example, 26th, or would you rather, and then have another, so have an exam midway through and then at the end have another exam, or have an exam just at the end after we complete the whole manzuma? Which one do you prefer? So there's 7 of you now, so it's easy to come to a conclusion.
Me personally, I prefer at the very end.
At the very end. All right, so hold on. So we've got end and we've got 2 exams. So we've got 1 for the end, hold on. Midway and halfway, okay. Midway, halfway. Bonus halfway, okay. 2 for halfway at the end, okay. 2, 2, halfway, 3, 2. Okay, 3, 2. So there's 5 people. 2 more at the end. Oh, great. Babe. The last person says what? There's 7 of you. It can't be a draw. 3 say at the end and 3 say halfway. One of you hasn't said anything. Maryam. طيب 4-3. طيب we'll have one halfway and one at the end, inshallah. So we'll have 2 exams. That's easier for you, by the way, having 2 exams. طيب, if there are no questions, we'll finish it off there. والله تعالى أعلم وأحكم وبالله توفيق.